live. See how many people we get in the room. Let me have a look. Turn that down. Go in the Discord 1 second. Right. Right, let's go. Have a little look at BTC. Obviously, over Christmas, it's going to be low volume with BTC. I hope you all had a really good Christmas. Even if you don't celebrate Christmas, you had some time to relax, time off the charts. You know, it will refresh the mind, you know, getting ready for the new year, you know, new markets, and we'll just, you know, go straight into it and have a little look at BTC on the daily. So, BTC, I've had this marked out. You know, we never actually touched that area what I wanted us to touch. But, you know, we are in a range. We're in a pretty crappy range at the minute. I'll just get it up on a fresh chart. We can have a little look here. So this, well, the October to November range. I just got October to October. So that was the range in October. We just, you know, choppy sideways, break away. And, you know, at the minute, excuse me, at the minute, what we're actually doing, we're doing exactly the same in the same sort of environment. We're just chopping around November. Sorry, that's December. Let me just get the one up on November. You know, when we eventually brought down. So that's the November volume profile. And what we've got now is December. We were at such a low volume month. We're still in that month. You know, we're struggling to break above these areas here. Yeah, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, but there's all this liquidity up here, there's all this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there is. That's true, yeah. There is a lot of liquidity up there. But if you look at the way we've had this move, you know, how much liquidity is sat below us? And if we have the, you know, from the all-time high previously, which was here, you know, I have pointed this out before, you know, we had a 77% correction. So even if we have 50% correction in BTC from all-time high, you know, that's 35. You know, 50 is going to take us to around 58k. You know, between 60 and 50, we'll say. It gives us a decent range to trade in. This is where you want to be building your wealth. You know, it's the exact same pattern, and I love it when people say this time's different. I absolutely love it because you know you've got your top, and then we had another top in November. This time round was slightly different. So it topped in October and then dropped down. So it topped the month before. Um, so that, that's what we've done. I'm just going to check, see if we've got any messages. Just want to see if there's anybody that wants to actually me to have a look at any coins. If you do, just pop it in there, and I'll have a little look at them for you. But back to Bitcoin, we had the top, and then we had the second top. We had the top, we had the second top, 35% correction so far. So, and it looks, if you're looking at it here, it looks rather similar. So, we had the top, it dropped, it chopped. Top, drop, chop, drop again, a little bit of a chop around. So it wouldn't surprise me if we do potentially pull back towards the 100k mark to test the lower end of it. So something like this, and then another decline, a bit similar to what happened here. It's not just going to instantly do that. But what I'm saying is it might drop into there again, pull back a little bit more sideways, and then drop like this, which is going to take us back to this untested area around 40k. And I know people don't want to hear that Bitcoin's going to go to 40k. I'm not saying it is going to go to 40k, but what I am saying is, this untested area here is around 60%. So you've got between 60 and 40k is where you want to really start building your long in Bitcoin. Let me just reply to this chat. So you want to be building your long between 60 and 40k in Bitcoin. And people don't want to hear that, just for the simple fact that many people have probably bought Bitcoin here up at the 120s because they listen to all the sausages on Twitter and places like that. And what they've done is they've listened to them and saying Bitcoin's never going to go back below 100k ever again. And then they're sat in a long from here. And now they're thinking, wow, what am I going to do? And a lot of people are going to close the trades. They will close the trades. That's almost guaranteed. Instead of just thinking, right, well, I bought it there, I might as well just wait now. Wait for this drop into these zones here, and then a major push up, and then Bitcoin eventually does. Because I do think it's going to go up to these areas. And if you wait, instead of just closing out your trade, well, obviously, if you're doing it on perps or futures, then you might have to. But Bitcoin's gonna probably do that again at some point. If we look at the moves that Bitcoin's done prior, these moves up are getting smaller. So that was a 500%. Let's just do it from the bottom to the actual top. So we're about a 600% there. From this bottom, they're around here. That's another 692%. So if we do get this nice correction, and it does go again, 600 and some percent, which I think it's going to get a little bit smaller, and we're potentially going to do around about maybe 400%. That's going to take BTC there, a 600% pull takes us to around 300k. So you want to be building down in here in Bitcoin. Right. So somebody wants me to have a little look at the ZEC. I'll have a little look at ZEC. Let's have a look at ZEC. I think I've already got something marked out in ZEC. So this was a trade I was looking at in ZEC. That was my long. So that long played out. This was a short that I really want to be looking at. So I want ZEC to drop back below this area, retest, and then go again. So that was a long in ZEC. We have a look at the move that it had. It's a 50% move. I'm going to delete everything on this chart at the minute, and I'm going to go fresh with ZEC. So you've got the consolidation up above us in ZEC around this area here. So if we're actually having a little look, so we've got the point of control around here. Excuse me, it's a new mouse that I've got, so it's a bit all over the place. So that's point of control, what it's just tested at the minute in ZEC. It has come back up above it, so it wouldn't surprise me if we potentially test the value area high in ZEC. Let me look at the whole range. You know, the main point of control in that area there, that move, is around 330. So potentially, if we can hold above that point of control, then yeah, ZEC could have that move towards the value area high at 638. Let's look at the whole range. It is outside value at the minute. So that's another thing that you need to take into account. It is outside value. But, you know, that move there wouldn't surprise me. If we're having a little look, where's the measuring tool? From that low, you know, it's done 77%. But you've got to remember, it's Christmas time, it's New Year time, so it's, you know, it's going to be a low trading environment, you know, a low volume. So you just need to be really careful with what you're actually trading. And if you look at ZEC, you know, nobody wanted ZEC at $46. It's done 1,500% all the way up to the top. Everybody wants ZEC at $700. I just don't get the mindset sometimes. And I understand that you don't really want to be, you know, in ZEC here down at these lows. But if you were just, you know, had high conviction, and yeah, you had to wait. How many years is that? You've had to wait nearly 2 years. But eventually, you got, you know, a 2,600% move out of ZEC. So it wouldn't surprise me if we do potentially come back to test these areas where we did move from. So if we have a little look at that there. So we've got an untested point of control here. Get that up, 239. And then before the breakout, it has tested that one, so I don't think it's going to go that low, but that's going to be an area of interest at 239. Where we are right now, you really wanted to build your long down in here. Potential short round 595 and 638 in ZEC. So keep that in mind. That could be a potential short. I might as well have a little look at ETH while I'm at it. That one, my prediction in ETH, gone pretty well so far. So if we have a look at the entry, 26%. So we're expecting a 30% drop in ETH. We did 26. So, you know, these are still on the cards. These sort of moves are still on the cards with these coins. You know, if you look at ETH, did it take out all-time high? It took out all-time high. And what you'll see with most of these coins, once they take out all-time high, they have a major, major correction. They don't just keep going up. So if you have a look, after it took that all-time high out, you know, the correction was 82% in ETH. All-time high has been taken out. I don't think we're going to do 82% correction, but a potential move back towards these areas, 65%, is potentially on the cards. So that wouldn't surprise me at all, where it could, you know, come back to test some of these areas that have been untested. You know, like these gaps that it's leaving in volume. GBTC, you know, I've had this pointed out in GBTC for a while now. You know, this this area down here is a really important area, which is going to drag BTC down to around the areas that I pointed out, so between 60 and 40k. I'm not a perma bear. I want Bitcoin to go up. I'm not a perma bull. I'm a trader. I want it to go up as well. If we're having a look at USDT dominance, consolidating above this area here, that could really see it move towards the 8% area, which is, a significant area that's not really being tested. And everybody's worrying at the minute. So, this sort of move is not off the cards, and the move down in BTC is not off the cards either. Gold is just tanking. Gold is the one that's everybody's flowing to. Silver, got silver there. Silver is absolutely rocketing. Unbelievable move on silver. Look at that. Unbelievable move. Just go to the weekly. Where's its all-time high in silver? Wow. What a move in silver that is. I did point out in silver, though, get some silver. I think it was around $20 odd. One of my videos, go back and look at one of my videos. That's a 200% move in silver that people have missed out on. Unreal move. Unbelievable. What a move that is. But, like any asset, look at the move it's had without really any correction. If we look at this move here, 166% move, it's had a 200% move, followed by a 71% decline. So that's a 200% move. A 70% decline will take it back down to around $23. And I'm not saying it's going to go all the way down to $23 in like 3 seconds, but unbelievable move in silver. Unbelievable. But a nice correction. If you just look at these areas where it does correct, these areas. So this area here could be an area where we want a 60% correction is where we want to start building our longs in silver. Or another push from this area, building our long here at about $30. $100 in off the cards with silver at the minute. Gold's the same. It's absolutely rocketing. Everybody's moving into it. Everybody's like, well, I'm moving into gold. It's a safe asset. So if you look at these prior consolidation areas where we do pull back to, it's about a 46-50% move back. So if we have a look, the move back, this could be the move back to around 2.5k in gold. If we move a little bit further down, that'll be another area there. Just around 2k to start building it in gold. S&P. If we have a look now, it looks like Bitcoin is decoupling away from the S&P 500. Just look at the move in the S&P 500 over the years. We have major corrections in this coin, in this asset. Around 50% corrections. Have a look. That's less 30. This correction here, 20. And that area here is still really untested. Around 41. Let's look at the dollar. Have a little look at the dollar, see what's going on. The dollar's just sideways at the minute. Yeah, it's just fully sideways, the dollar at the minute. NQ. I think there's a lot going on with NQ. I wanted to build a short there and then queue if it gets to it. Might be a pretty bad idea to build a short there, but we'll see. We'll have a little look. Total. Where is it? Get total up at the minute. Total. Crypto cat. But this is total at the minute. You know, pulling back towards these areas here. You know, and I did point that out in the group as well, in the Discord group. Dominance. Have a little look at dominance. You know, dominance could pull back to around this 55% mark. Or potentially even lower. We'll just have to see. But, you know, this could be a really good area. Around 48% in dominance, which is where BTC is probably going to pull back to around 60, 40k. That area, you know, is where it's going to start to chop. And then, boom, off she goes. Nobody really wants alts. That's what we're looking at the minute. Not many people want alts. I'm trying to think of any coins that I can look at. Sol. I'll have a little scan at Sol. So Solana potentially coming back to around $80. Start building longs. Maybe even we'd say between $80 and $60 to start building your longs in Solana. And I do reckon it is going to have a really decent move. And Sol potentially could, you know, we get back to these areas, start to get into it, you know, Sol around $400, which is going to be a good move in Sol. XRP, don't listen to any of these analysts because they're all full of crap. I do what I do. I look at certain areas of interest and I think, right, is that going to be an area for me to start building along? You know, if you look at these areas where it comes back to test, has XRP really tested the top end of these areas yet? Not really. So if XRP does make that correction of around 50%, 0.8 could be a nice area to start building along. And, you know, I can see XRP going to around $4, maybe $5 in the long run. So if we start to build our long around order 8, and we're looking at around $5, you know, that's a 500% move again. So Sui, have a little look. Sui has already corrected into these zones when we had that massive crash. Hey, how we doing? How we doing, Malik? So yeah, this is just what I'm looking at the minute. These could be good areas to build longs in. Sui around $1. Start to build along in Sui. If you've missed any of them, any of the coins that I've thrown out, I have recorded it anyways, and it will be live on YouTube, so you can go back and have a little look. I'm just trying to think, is there any other coins that I really want to look at? They're the big five out there: ETH, Sol, BTC, XRP, and Sui. So Sui, you know, this area here is where you want to be looking to build your longs, and I can see Sui going to around $8 potentially, you know, in the next bull. So if we're looking at around $8, you know, that's nearly a 900% move from these lows of around $1. It's a good project as well, so it's not like it's a load of crap. It's a really good project, so, you know, something to keep an eye on. So they're really, me personally, I'm buying ETH and BTC solely. I've got Sol already. I'm probably going to add to that bag. XRP, I'm not really interested in it, but I might buy a little bag of XRP and Sui. So the altcoins that I've got at the minute, they're all a load of crap, so I'm going to get rid of them, and I'm just going to buy the big five. So if you want to follow me with that, buy the big five, and You know, you can see what's actually going on with them. I'll tell you what I'm going to be doing when I'm going to be doing it. Is it anything at the minute that anybody else wants me to look at? If I will have a look. Come off of that a second. Trying to see if there's all in here that I can actually look. BNB. Let's have a look at BNB. So BNB is another one, had a really nice move. You know, you want it to really come and test some of these lows. It's like it did here. Tested these lows and then pushed off. So it has technically tested them lows at the minute. Just get that out and have a look. But if BTC goes down, it's coming back to test these lows again. You know, around 70%. That's about $400. Potentially, you can be looking at BNB longs. That might be something to look at, because if you look at the corrections, you know, in BNB, you know, it generally tests the bottom of these areas, 72%. So if we do get this continuous move back, 40% move to these lows around $500, and then you can ride BNB back towards potentially 2K, which will be a good move in BNB, you know, 300% move. But like I say, the only things that I'm really looking at is ETH, SOL, XRP, SUE, and BTC. They're the only ones that I'm buying. You know, after gold and silver have the correction, because they will. I will be nibbling at them areas that I've just pointed out as well in my other account. So yeah, that's it. I just literally came on to wish you all a Merry Christmas, and you know, just have a little look at what's actually going on in the markets. Obviously, it's low volume, and we'll be back at it tomorrow in Discord on the charts. So I'm gonna get off, and you know, Sunday low volume, just relax, spend some time with the family, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.